Okay, so here we go. So with the word problems on these, very first thing we have.
Tell them to be nice to me. I have not been mean.
I'm into this. No.
All right, so the very first one on this one, and then all these will be basically the same way. You got to find the missing value, and then they have to tell you what type of relationship we're looking at as we go through this thing. So the very first problem will be here. We've got to find the missing value, the inverse relationship with ordered pairs, and then they'll tell us which ones we have here. So we're going to have one at 2, 5, and then you'll have one with the missing value. Let's say it's at 4 and Y. Okay, so when you're seeing the word problems, that's about what it will be. They're not going to be like super duper long, not going to be like a paragraph long. It's going to be one sentence, maybe 2 sentences of, here's some information we have. Key thing on these is you've got to figure out which type of relationship you're looking at first. It's either going to be inverse or direct. In this case, it says it's inverse. So if it's inverse, your general equation for something that's an inverse is y equals k over x. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to kind of figure out is, all right, what equation am I going to use? And that one you have to know, again, if it's inverse, it's y equals k over x. If it says direct relationship, then it's y equals k times x. In this case, it's inverse. So what we have to do then, basically, is this part. They give you an ordered pair here that's at 2, 5. This is your first x and y ordered pair. So you've got to find k. So you got to find your k value first. So if this is the equation we have, we've got x and y, so we're going to use our first order pair to plug it back in. So we've got then that 5 would equal k over 2, plugging in x and y here. And I don't know about y'all, but that's pretty easy math there, right? If 5 equals k over 2, what's k value going to be? There we go. Easy math, right? So they ask you, now sometimes they may just ask you, what is the constant of proportionality? Or the constant of variation in this case. If that's the case, we've got our k value, we've got k is 10, and once you've used your first ordered pair to get that number, then basically you just kind of scratch that one out because we used it to figure out what the k value is. Now the second thing you're going to do is now we know that k is equal to 10. From the second order pair, we know that x equals 4. So now we're going to plug in x equals 4 and k equals 10 back into the same equation again. Again, now we know that k is 10. We know that x is 4 from back up here. And then y is what we're missing. So y is going to equal 10 over 4. Well, that's easy enough. 10 divided by 4 is 5 over 2. That one, you may get to leave it as a fraction. You could change it to a decimal. If that's the case, I don't really care. Either one would be fine now. So final answer, either 5 over 2 or 2.5. Okay, and pretty much all the problems will be that same setup as you go through these. You've got to figure out whether it's inverse or direct, so you know which equation you're going to use. And then once you know the equation that you use, you just take the values that you're given, plug it back in to figure out what your k value is, and then once you've got your k value, you know what the relationship is going to be. So then if you've got one value, you can plug in anything and find out what the other value is going to be. Okay, now some of these may not, so that's one where we're finding a specific value. So it said find the missing value, the inverse relationship, y was missing, so we had to find the y value. Some of these, it may just say to write a general equation. So same type problem. We're going to change that just a little bit for this one, for example, too. It may just say to write the general equation for direct variation. That contains the ordered pair 4A. Okay, so a little different wording, but it's still the same steps as you go through this one. That you've got it first off. Again, we got direct variation. So again, we know we're going to use y equals k over x. Sorry, hold on. Direct variation, y equals k times x. Okay, and then from there, this is the order pair x and y. So we're going to use those two values to figure out what the k value is first. So again, we've got x is 4, y is 8. We don't know what the k value is.
Teachers, please pardon this interruption. At this time, release any students to Gym 2 for
Okay, so again, yeah, divide both sides by 4. We know that k is equal to 2. Okay, now it doesn't say for the way the question is written, it doesn't say define k. It says write the general equation. So then all you have to do then is take the same general equation that we have here, the y equals k times x, but you plug in k value of 2. So your general equation would just wind up being y equals 2 times x. And that way, if you've got any x value at all, you can plug it in to know what the y value would have to be with it. Or if they give you the y value, you can plug it back in to find out what the x value would be. Yeah. So again, if we took that same question and just kind of expanded it with, one more little quick question here. Let's do this one. Now find the missing value of the ordered pair at x comma 10. Okay, so that's the equation that we have. And again, if you want to think about this one, this is basically like y equals mx plus b whenever we're doing direct variation. It's just there is no b value, so this one we're always going to start basically at 0. And that's kind of where direct variation kind of ties in with some of the other things that we've been doing, because it's really very similar to y equals mx plus b. Okay, so y value is 10. We plug in the 10 for y equals 2x. Well, that's easy math there. We'll take 10 divided by 2, so this missing value would give us that x equals 5. Okay, so direct variation, inverse variation, it's still the same thing. It's just a matter of when you start off with it, it just starts with a different equation depending on what values they give to you. Okay, and now the 1/3 type that we didn't talk about yet. We mentioned it last time, but joint variation. Joint variation basically is just an extension of direct variation with more variables. So when we're doing direct variation before, you had one x, you had a y value. For joint variation, it may be that there may be an x and a y. There might be a z to the third power. There could be a square root of t. You could throw. You just throw in more variables as you go through this thing, and then you just kind of figure out how it would be for this one. For these, man, we'll show you a little different, and it would still work the same way. Now, for joint variation, that's one they would have to give you the formula first. So a lot of these cases for joint variation, it's probably going to be the opposite, where they're not going to ask you to find like specific values in some cases. It may be more of they're going to ask you just to write out an equation on this thing. Okay, so for this example, we'll do something like this. We're going to write an equation where y varies jointly with the temperature, which is T, and the pressure, which we'll call P squared. Okay, and then all these equations that we have, they all kind of set up the exact same way. That whatever variable they give to you first, we got y in this case. You start with that equation. Whenever you see the word varies, when you've got the varies part of it, that part of it is where we're going to have an equals k. Okay, and then everything after that is going to be just whatever your variables you have, and you do what you have to do. So again, jointly is basically the same thing as like a direct variation. So if it's direct, it goes directly beside it. So this one varies jointly with the temperature T, and then the pressure P squared. So if it's direct or joint, it goes right beside the K value. If it's inverse, we would have to put it underneath the K value. Okay. Now, and after that, once you got the equation, and this is where sometimes I don't like to do this part. It may just be where I have you write an equation. After that one, they may get, especially on Math Excel, that's one where you can check and see if you've got the equation correct. If not, you get a chance to fix it. And then after that, they may give you some values for, T and P and Y, and then ask you to figure out what the K value might be. At that point, it's just plugging numbers in and just working through it just like we were before. But we're mostly just kind of worried about writing out the different equations here. All right, so let's give you one with the inverse here. Let's do y varies inversely.
We have to keep on this paper. We have to because I only have 8 pages left in my notebook.
I got one more example after this left.
Okay.
Okay, so we got y varies inversely with the square root of t. Again, you start with your equation, you start with a variable you have, and as soon as you see the word varies, that's always going to be your equals k. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it says inversely or jointly or directly, it doesn't matter. It always is going to say y varies. And basically, whenever you see that part, that's y equals k. and then the word after that tells you where to go with it. If it's inversely, that means that whatever comes next has to go underneath the k value. So it's inversely with the square root of t. Then basically you just got that. And again, this is one where they may give you a value and say, all right, well, if y equals k over t, they may give you an order pair. If it's 4, 8, go ahead and find out what the next order pair would be, or find out what the k value would be as you go through those. So it would work exactly the same way where you just take the values and plug it back in. Okay, and then the last problem here.
We did it.
Let's go y varies jointly with the square of p and the square root of t and inversely with z. Okay, I'm right at the bottom of the page. So I'm actually going to put this one, put it up here so we got it. And again, you've got the very beginning here. You've got y varies. So that part we're going to have y equals k. And again, everything after that tells you where to go. If it's joint or direct in this case, that means it goes on the top. So on the top part right beside the k, we need a p squared and a square root of t. And then on the bottom, it says inversely with z. So then we need to divide by z. Okay. And everything else is just, and again, there may be some other word problems that's a little bit different than that one. But everything else is just figuring out whether it's joint, direct, or inverse. And again, anything that's joint or direct goes on the top beside the k value. Anything that's inverse has got to go underneath the k value.